Welcome to Treble the Trouble with your hosts, crochet designers Faye, Helen, and Vicky.
Hello and welcome to Treble the Trouble with Fave Techniques and Stitches. This is our monthly podcast with Faye, Helen and Vicky. I'm Vicky. Hello. So we're just coming out of lockdown now, and I was wondering, what have you guys been doing most of for the last year or so when we've been stuck indoors?
For me, the first 6 months were spent gardening.
So no crochet.
I did do a little bit, but I'd had a really stressful time leading up to lockdown for a variety of reasons. And lockdown was good because it made me take a step back, relax, and the gardening was good because it was physical labor. You didn't need to think about it. It was physical, not mental.
You also had the bonus of that heat wave.
Yes, we did. We had the heat wave at the beginning of the first lockdown. I got absolutely loads done, and I didn't realise quite how much I was going to enjoy it all. It's not been something that I've particularly been that interested in. I love flowers, but gardening in general, with all the other things that it entails, I really enjoyed it. And my garden is looking amazing, and it's only sort of really early at the moment. It's looking very yellow actually, because I've got daffodils, cowslip and celandines out there. I had nothing to do with the celandines, those are all self-seeded, but I did plant the cowslips and the daffodils.
That's lovely. So when we're allowed to all meet up again, you'll be able to have your crochet classes in the garden.
I'm hoping to do that from May the 17th. Yes, I spent a lot of time working on the garden last year. The brief periods that we were able to do classes last year, they were done in the garden and the students loved it. So I'm actually only planning on opening part-time until about September, so that we can have the classes in the garden again and enjoy all the hard work I put in last year.
Sounds lovely.
So what have you been up to, Faye?
Well, I've been lucky enough to live on my boat, and we had some beautiful weather, like Helen said. So I was using my cockpit for where I was working, and I found myself doing a lot of YouTube videos. The light up there worked fantastic. And looking back at the ones that we actually published, I've done an awful lot of amigurumi. And I'm not a fan of amigurumi, but I'm not quite sure how I've ended up doing quite so much. But it's not just the crochet videos. I've done a lot of other videos on there as well. So I've been working on the YouTube channel and getting that bigger. Oh, I'm planning a really epic around the UK trip.
Of course.
Yeah. What about you? What was your last 12 months like?
Very strange. The children are still at home, so that was very strange to begin with. But in terms of keeping myself busy, I've been able to go to work, which I count myself very lucky to have a safe workplace, and it was relatively normal. And then crochet wise, I found that I couldn't design. I've heard of lots of people saying they couldn't do things that they usually did. My mum couldn't read. For 12 months, she didn't pick up a book, and she just eats books usually. So I made lots of granny squares and lots of blankety things because that helped. And now that we see light, all of a sudden I have all the ideas fighting for all the attention in my head. And I really need to stop starting new projects.
Yeah, I think that everybody's a bit like that, because the first one I found it a lot easier, but it was because I needed the break. But this one I found it really difficult. The one in November wasn't too bad because you knew it was only for a month. But this last one, I found it really difficult.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I have a lot of things that I've tried to concentrate on and couldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the weather is terrible.
Yeah. And then we heard that we could open the shop back up again, and not straight away, but gradually sort of all my get up and goers sort of come back.
Yeah.
You know, I've been spending time down the shop getting it ready, and yeah, I'm really hoping that this actually does last, that the things do stick to the roadmap and we do come out the other end, because I'm not sure how I would deal with another one.
That makes a lot of sense. I must admit, this time round, I have been feeling more of the burnout and having more flare-ups of my chronic illness, which hasn't really helped and has left me quite demotivated the last couple of months. So it does make sense.
You know, I don't suffer with depression, but I can understand why people do and have, and I can understand all those feelings, whereas I couldn't before.
I think we've all had a taste of that in these lockdowns. Everybody's seen what it's like for some people all the time.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's where our favourite hobby comes in, isn't it?
Yeah.
Merges quite nicely into that. So talking about favourite hobby, which of course for the three of us is crochet, this month we are talking about our favourite technique. So each one of us has picked a technique that we prefer, and we're also going to discuss our favourite stitch as well. So let's start with you, Helen. What is your favourite stitch?
My favourite is your nice plain old boring double crochet. For those watching in the US, because I know there are some, that's the single crochet. But it's so versatile. You can do so many things with it. You can do it really tight to make toys. You can do it looser when you want other things. It lends itself really well to short rows for shaping and thread painting, and you can see from the clematis petals here how I've used 2 strands and shaded the petals, and if you look closely you can also see the short rows that have made the shapes, you know, the right shape for the petals. It's just so versatile. I love using it. It is a very basic stitch.
What else can you say about a double crochet?
Well, this is it. You know, it has so many uses, but there's not really a lot you can say about it.
It's the first stitch I taught to my daughter, and in a little crochet club we had at her primary school before I started working again. That was the first stitch, well, chaining obviously, but double crochet was the first stitch I taught them, because you don't have to remember to keep how many times round the hook. It's just so straightforward and so quick to get a result.
I mean, students keep saying to me, how difficult is this pattern? And I say to them, oh, it's easy, it's only double crochet. It is actually the most basic stitch. Some people would say it's the most boring stitch, but it all depends on how it's used. I mean, I can see all those Amy Watsits in the background, and those all use it. I have a puppet here, and you know, this uses it. It's just so versatile.
I think your scarf also uses it, doesn't it?
No, those are trebles.
No? Oh, they are. Oh.
So what do you like using then, Faye?
Well, I actually really like a herringbone half treble. A half treble is the next stitch size up from a double crochet, but the herringbone half treble kind of gives it a little bit of extra length. I find it a really versatile stitch that's actually quite stretchy. So yeah, so I really like the herringbone half treble. When you bring your loop through to the front, you actually slip it under the first loop on your hook before you finish making your treble. And on the socks, it kind of gives a zigzag effect. These are worked in the round, but they're turned after each row. So you end up with these half trebles that kind of zigzag. You know, they point in one direction on one row and then they point in the opposite direction in another row, which lends itself to some really nice colour work when you've got a variegated yarn. But it also is quite a stretchy stitch.
Yeah, it looks quite pretty and textured as well.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I used it on this poncho as well, along with a bit of broomstick crochet, and this actually shows up better what I was trying to describe with the stitches, and it helps. It has a bit of drape to it as well. It's just, I don't know, I find myself using it a lot in my projects.
Right.
So Vicky, what's your favourite stitch?
I really, really like raised stitches. So I think we call them raised trebles or raised whatever it might be in the UK. In America, they're called usually front post and back post stitches. They add texture. And especially if you work around the back post on the right side, you get little flashes of colour where you've changed colour. So it just adds and makes the most of all the different yarns that you're using. I use it a lot. I think I rarely create anything these days without somehow finding a way to throw a raised stitch into it. Yeah, that's probably my favourite stitch.
I have to agree with this because my favourite technique is using raised stitches, but creating cables and patterns with them.
Oh, next level.
It is,
oh,
right.
Definitely. So this poncho I did for Inside Crochet. I remember sitting in my parents' for their 50th wedding anniversary, and I was sitting there in the middle of a heat wave in August making this poncho because they wanted it for one of the winter issues. Yeah, it was great fun.
Sounds a bit hot.
Actually, it wasn't too bad because I discovered that when we got back home, the temperatures had been a lot hotter at home than they were at my parents who live on the coast. So that was quite lucky. But this is 100% wool. It's Aran wool. And yeah, it was hot sitting underneath it. But it's so lovely to wear. And every time I wear it, people ask me if I've knitted it.
I can see why, because cables aren't that common in crochet, are they?
They're not, and they should be, because you can do some amazing things with them. This is the first cable design that I did for Inside Crochet. So this is another one which was a little bit more involved because it's two separate cable designs. You can see the one has it's like a panel down the middle, and the other one's an all over design. But there's just so much you can do with them, and I love them. In fact, I have a project in mind which I'm just going to tease you with because I don't want to tell you too much about it, because at the moment it's still running around my head trying to get out. But yeah, it's going to be lots of Aran patterns.
Sounds good.
That sounds really exciting.
It's something I'm really looking forward to, but I have a project here on the go that I really, really, really need to get out of the way before I start a new one.
Very disciplined.
No, I'm not. That's the problem.
She just makes it look like she's very disciplined and puts the rest of us to shame.
So as I hijacked your raised stitches, Vicky, what's your favourite technique?
My favourite technique is working seamlessly. I love the fact that just how easy it is with crochet to make something completely seamlessly. This was a sweet little baby cardigan that I made. It's top down, worked in one piece, and the only sewing was the ends and the buttons. It's just so easy, and you're not left with all that. When I used to knit, and I would knit a baby cardigan in all the pieces, the fronts, the backs, the sleeves, and it would be beautiful. And then I would sew it together, and my putting it together was not nearly as nice as my knitting. So it ruined it. But with crochet, it's just top down in rows until you get to, you work in rows to the underarm, then you carry on in rows, missing out the sleeve stitches, then you add the front borders, then you work the sleeves in rounds, turning at the end of each round. Job done. What's not to
And only
love?
2 ends.
Yeah, maybe 4 ends, because one of the fronts continues from the body, but the other front you do have to rejoin. But 4 ends for a whole cardigan is pretty good.
There are a lot of people who totally ruin their projects because they don't manage to sew them up properly.
Yeah.
And it is a big issue. And if you can do it like that, that's so much easier.
Seams are completely stretchy as well. You haven't, well, there aren't seams as such, but everything stretches the way all the stitches stretch. There are no pinch points. It doesn't tug at your shoulder or anything like that. If you're making something for yourself, you can try it on as you go as well.
Yes, that's especially working top down.
Yeah.
That's why I like to work top down, because you can just try it on until it's big enough, and then
then move on to the next stage of construction.
I like working in the round, so when I have made garments for myself, they have been technically seamless, but then quite a few of them are worked in the round. Yeah, I find I do a lot of in the round stuff. Socks are working in the round, soft toys are worked in the round, jumpers and cardigans I have a habit of working in the round, ponchos. I work in the round a lot.
I can see a theme coming in this lot, right, where you don't like sewing the ends in.
Does anybody?
I hate sewing ends.
This is one of the reasons I don't like doing stuff with lots of colours, is because of all the ends. Well, but all this variegated wool, that's just amazing, no ends to sew in.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to. There's things that you do that you need to use different colours, you need to do sewing and things, but crochet gives you that option that you can always do something a little bit different and only have the end at the end to sew in.
Some of my early projects were mandalas, and I hated sewing the ends in on that, but I still find that I will revert back to making mandalas, which again is worked in the round. But now I'm looking at ways to work them in the round and turn each round as well, whereas the early ones were all worked in the same direction. I really need to try doing it in monochrome as opposed to lots and lots of different colours. But then that just reminds me of all the old doilies.
Yeah.
When you say monochrome, do you mean one colour?
Single colour.
Or a single colour? So yeah. You see, doilies have their place. Just not in my house.
They don't have a place in mine either. However, I am finding lots of surface walls and doors and things I'm covering in hooped mandalas. that I've
Well,
made.
that's just an evolved doily, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
There are some pretty amazing doily patterns out there, actually, that
Yeah.
if you were to make it in something else, and then put it in a hoop, and you can call it a mandala. But
Mm.
there are lots of amazing doily patterns out there.
I think I could
I
even
don't
see
have-
myself making one to stand a vase of flowers on, if it was really pretty yarn, and not just a plain one, but something that was really pretty and the colours of flowers that I like, and a glass vase. That would look lovely.
Yeah,
But I don't have time.
No, if somebody put a question on Facebook earlier, is it just me, or does anybody else find that by the time you get halfway through your current project, your mind's already wandering to the next one? And I answered with, my mind's already wandered to the next 5.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that sounds about right for sure.
Yes. I think there's that classic thing. I think it was Picasso, but I wouldn't swear to this. Somebody asked him what his favorite painting was, and he said the next one.
After the year that we've had, actually, I think letting yourself start as many projects as you like is not a bad thing.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Apart from the fact I don't think I can fit any more in the ottoman.
You need another ottoman.
A bigger ottoman.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, just for fun, ladies, where is the strangest place you have ever crocheted?
The cinema.
Yeah, I've done that too.
I've never done it in cinema. Tell us more.
I took my son, how he would have been possibly for his 7th or 8th birthday. So I took my son and 2 of his friends to see the Disney film, I think it was Disney, Racing Stripes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know the film. And I had the 3 boys sat in the row in front of me, and I sat in the row behind them working on a blanket that I was working on at the time.
Perfect.
And the good thing about crochet is you haven't got the clacking of the needles, so you can get away with it in such a quiet environment.
This is it. It was white and it was all double crochet. So it was a case of you didn't really need to look at it that much. You know, it was a pretty boring piece because it was just rows and rows and rows of double crochet. It was a background for something else, which is why it was so boring. And I made 6 of them. So,
wow. So you needed to do it in the cinema.
It was a set of the 6 animal blankets that are on my website.
The
So
ones with the motifs.
Yes. So the motifs were fun, but the backgrounds were boring. And I did think of a few more designs I could have done, but I got bored doing the backgrounds.
I have actually sat outside the school waiting for the children to come out in the car, because we're in a village, so the secondary school is in the next town. I've crocheted many times sitting in the car, and people walk past you and you can see them looking. And swimming pools, waiting rooms, hospitals, everywhere.
Yeah, I've done quite a few of those as well.
Yeah.
I don't think those places are really strange though, because
I think
everybody does that.
Yeah, I don't think anywhere is strange to crochet, really. I think I may have crocheted in the pub.
Yeah, I've done that as well.
Pub, yes.
Yeah. Okay, how about on the front deck of your boat at high tide?
Oh, that's perfect.
It was perfect. It was actually really, really nice. And the conversations I had with other residents as they were wandering up the pontoon and back. And yeah, that was good. And that was for the rainbows that I attached to the boat last year.
I think the cinema has got to be the most sort of obscure place for me.
But I think probably what we're saying is nowhere is obscure, really.
No.
Nowhere is off limits.
No,
definitely not. I mean, lots of people crochet in the car. I mean, my gran was always crocheting in the car.
I do that.
Thankfully, she wasn't the one driving.
Yeah, but you don't even need light, because you can get light up crochet hooks as well.
Well, actually, I remember doing one. We were coming back about 10 o'clock at night, and we were on the motorway, and of course you've got plenty of street lights. So I'm crocheting by street lights, you know, as we're going along the motorway.
That's brilliant.
And then we got to a bit that was a bit more rural, and there wasn't any lights, but it was just trebles. You can feel your way.
Yes,
that's it. Most of my socks have actually been made on car trips. I think socks and granny squares are perfect for long road trips.
Yeah, you need a stitch that you haven't got to follow a pattern, because I can crochet in a car but not read.
Yes,
reading makes me feel ill. But something simple and straightforward that you're just repeating. Perfect.
I've written patterns in the car.
That doesn't surprise me. do you put your netbook on the dashboard?
Yeah, with a plug-in charger into the cigarette lighter. I bought a charger for the netbook that plugged into the cigarette lighter, and I was writing patterns in the car.
I have been driving and asked my youngest
at the time.
But I've been driving, and as you do when you're doing something like that, all the ideas just float around your head. And I have had to ask my daughter to take notes on her phone for me so that I don't forget the things I'm thinking.
That's a good one. I like that.
Why else do we have children?
That is very true.
Take notes for us.
Yeah, admin. Yeah. So this episode has mostly been about our favourite technique and our favourite stitch. But do you have a technique that you dread and that you avoid like the plague?
Not so much a technique, but I hate making those amigurumi things. I cannot bear it. I've made some in the past when Isabel was little and desperately wanted me to. But if I can avoid making them for the rest of my life, I will be happy.
I do small toys, but I turn and go back the other way, so they're not strictly Amy Watsits.
Well,
but mine is popcorn.
Oh God, yeah.
Oh yes, I don't like that either.
I do not like the fact that you have to take your hook out and put it back in. You can't just carry on. Give me a good old-fashioned cluster anytime.
Yeah.
I think I'm with you on that.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean,
what about you?
They can look good, and they do have their place. I was just looking at my dear de los Muertos, and it was all pop for the crowns across the skulls. It was 4 rounds of popcorn stitch, and it looks effective.
But it drove
I
you mad.
have to admit that I probably would have changed the pattern and done clusters instead.
Yeah. I think
I'm with
you on that.
It's definitely popcorn. I have to admit, I didn't used to like Tunisian. First time I did it was on long straight needles. It was difficult. The needles were uncomfortable because I'm used to using something this big, not this big, and I couldn't get on with it. Then the next time I tried it was on like circular type ones.
Yep. So with the cable.
Yes. That's so much easier.
Yeah.
Because you've only got your normal sized hook and you've got the cable to take the rest of it and to take the weight and everything else.
Yeah.
So I don't dislike Tunisian anymore. But that was a pet hate when I first tried it.
I haven't really got a pet hate yet, and there's not a technique or anything that I dread yet. But I do dread a pattern that is where the main stitch is double treble or triple treble. I end up with a lot of nerve pain in my wrist if the pattern's got a lot of double trebles in it. So I try to avoid patterns with those because of the nerve pain in my wrist.
Yeah.
Which actually comes from the shoulder. So it's like that constant movement.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's mine.
Cabling might not be the best thing for you then, because a lot of the effect of getting the crossed over stitches and things is to use longer ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. The odd few in a pattern I can cope with, but it's when it's a pattern that the double treble is the dominant stitch.
Right.
So you'd need to make something small that was cabled.
Yeah.
Some nice
I do tend to use half trebles as a background when I'm doing cables.
Yeah.
Because when you do the raised stitches, so your half treble is that big, and your treble is normally that big.
Yep.
But when you're doing raised stitches, so they're going round the post, it's the other way round. So you have them the same at the top, but the bottom comes down lower, and a half treble is the perfect size for using with raised trebles and double trebles when you're crossing them.
Yeah. I know a half treble gives you enough post to go around as well.
If you need to, yes. It depends on which bits you're doing. Normally, when you're doing the cables, you stick to the stitches that are already raised.
Yep. Yeah.
But sometimes you do need to do other ones.
Yeah. I had a brilliant conversation with a proofreader by email today. She's a new proofreader, and they tend to ask a lot of questions first off. And she wanted to know whether it was UK or British English, because there were a couple of words, one being flashlight and the other being yarn. And I said, well, UK spelling, please, for words like mum and things like that. Flashlight's okay. And yarn is actually commonly used now because it describes all the many fibres you can buy.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's like I was working with t-shirt yarn this morning, and one of the ladies on the chat went, "What wool are you using?"
I'm not, it's cotton. It's funny, isn't it? Because growing up it was always wool. When I was a kid, it was always wool.
You either had wool or cotton. Well, now we have yarn and thread.
Yeah.
But it always used to be, didn't matter if it was scratchy acrylic or whatever else they called it. It was wool.
Yeah.
And, wool and cotton. So, yeah.
Thank you very much for joining us for this episode. We look forward to joining you again next month, where we will be discussing CE testing with special guests Sam and Amanda. If you've enjoyed this episode, please give us a thumbs up down below, which lets us know that you've liked our videos. Subscribe to our channel so that you get a notification of new videos going up. And if you want to support us, pop over to patreon.com/unravel and unwind. Thank you, and we'll see you again next month. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. This video has been made possible thanks to Unravel and Unwind Patreon supporters. You too can become a patron for as little as £3.60 a month. To subscribe, visit www.patreon.com